The sound of shattered glass echoed across the silent office floor as the businessman stepped in and saw one of his trusted employees clutching stolen money in trembling hands. The sight pierced his heart deeper than any betrayal he had ever known. To tell us where you're watching from, we'd truly love to know, and if there was a moment in this story that touched your soul, please share it with us in the comments. It would mean the world to us to hear your heart. He stood there in disbelief, not because of the money, but because the man before him was someone he had guided, mentored, and trusted. The employee fell to his knees, begging for mercy, his eyes wide with fear, expecting anger, or perhaps even the end of his career, but instead, he felt a hand on his shoulder, firm yet gentle. The businessman looked down at him and said softly, "You made a mistake. But you are more than this mistake. I will not destroy your future for one desperate act." The words struck like thunder through the young man's soul. He could not believe that forgiveness was possible in such a moment. The rest of the staff watched in silence, unable to understand how their leader could choose compassion over punishment. But deep within, they felt something change. A seed of loyalty planting itself in their hearts. Days passed, and the employee transformed. He became the most dedicated worker, arriving before anyone else, leaving after everyone had gone. His guilt turned into a fire that drove him to prove his worth, and the businessman, though still hurt, kept his faith in him. But destiny had more trials ahead for this company. Months later, when the market collapsed, the company that once flourished began to sink into heavy losses. Projects failed, debts rose, and whispers of bankruptcy spread like wildfire. Fear gripped every corner of the building, yet the businessman stood tall, refusing to abandon his people. His staff looked at him, wondering how long he could fight. Alone, they felt the weight of his sleepless nights and the silent battles he fought while trying to keep their salaries alive. What no one knew was that the breaking point was approaching, and the greatest test of loyalty was yet to come. The breaking point arrived on a stormy evening when the businessman gathered his entire staff in the dimly lit hall. His voice heavy with exhaustion, he confessed the truth. The company was on the edge of collapse. The bank had refused another loan, investors had pulled out, and within weeks, there would be nothing left but debts. The silence that followed was suffocating. Some lowered their heads. Others fought back tears, for they had families waiting at home and responsibilities that could not be ignored. Yet, what happened next was something no one had expected. The very same employee who had once stolen from the company stepped forward. His voice trembled, but his eyes burned with conviction. He declared that he would not abandon the man who had once chosen mercy over punishment. His words spread like fire through the room, igniting courage in hearts that, moments before, were drowning in despair. One by one, the staff stood beside their boss, pledging to work without pay until the storm passed. The businessman felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with overwhelming gratitude. In that moment, he realized that the loyalty he had sown through compassion was returning to him tenfold. They worked day and night, cutting expenses, finding new strategies, and reaching out to small clients who still believed in them. They turned off the lights to save electricity, skipped meals together, and shared whatever little they had. But never once did they let their leader fight alone. Slowly, a fragile hope began to rise, like the faint light of dawn on a long, dark night. Yet with every step forward came new obstacles. Competitors circled like vultures, ready to steal whatever was left. Rumors in the market painted the company as a sinking ship, and old allies turned their backs. But inside those walls, something extraordinary was happening. The staff was no longer just a group of employees. They had become a family, forged in fire and sacrifice. And though survival was still uncertain, their unity was building an unshakable force that even failure could not break. What none of them knew was that the turning point of their journey was now closer than ever. Months turned into years, and the company that was once on the brink of collapse began to rise again. Their sacrifices started to bear fruit. Small contracts grew into bigger ones, Clients returned. Investors came knocking, and slowly the tides shifted. What began as a fragile spark of hope had turned into a roaring flame of success. The businessman watched in awe as his people carried the weight of a dream that belonged to all of them together, not just him. They had rebuilt the foundation of the company not with money, but with loyalty, trust, and love. Their story spread across the city, whispered, as an example of what true leadership and unity could achieve. Soon the company was no longer a name known only in one town. It grew across the nation, and then beyond borders, until one day it stood tall as a global empire, stronger than anyone could have imagined. The same hall that once echoed with fear and despair now overflowed with laughter and celebration. The employees who had once worried about losing their jobs now stood as partners in a dream fulfilled. They raised their glasses, not only for success, but for the bond that had carried them through fire. Yet life is never without its final twists. On the night of their grand celebration, the businessman stepped aside from the noise, watching his people with quiet pride. A tear slipped from his eye, for he knew the truth that few others did. His health was failing, and his time was shorter than he had let anyone believe. He had poured everything into his people and his company, and now they would carry the legacy forward. He whispered to himself that he could leave this world knowing he had not built a business, but a family. The music swelled, the laughter filled the air, and, under the lights of triumph, the man who once forgave a thief smiled for the last time. The company lived on, stronger than ever, but the heart behind it had given its final beat, leaving behind a legacy that would never fade.